At its peak, Sega's Genesis outsold nearly every rival. But by 1997, their market share had collapsed to just 12%, and the company was bleeding from hardware missteps. So why did their last gamble, a console packed with cutting-edge tech and a vision of the future, end in losses nearing $5 billion and the death of an iconic brand? The answer isn't just failure, it's how the Dreamcast became both Sega's boldest triumph and its fatal mistake. The real story begins with a company on the brink and a question: when does innovation cross the line into disaster? Genesis once stood as Sega's crowning achievement, moving over 30 million units worldwide and earning a reputation for speed, style, and attitude. But the years that followed saw the company drift from that peak, weighed down by a series of costly miscalculations. The first blow came with the Sega CD, an ambitious add-on meant to extend the Genesis' life. Instead, it confused the market and split the audience, offering a handful of memorable games but failing to justify its expense. Then came the 32X, another hardware attachment promising a leap into 32-bit graphics. Released in 1994, it arrived just months before the Saturn, leaving buyers and developers wary. Both add-ons quickly faded, their libraries thin and their legacies defined by disappointment. The Saturn's arrival was supposed to restore Sega's momentum. In Japan, the system found some early success, but its North American debut was marred by a surprise early launch that caught retailers and publishers off guard. The machine's complex architecture, built around dual processors, made development difficult and expensive at a time when the industry was shifting to simpler, more accessible hardware. Sony's PlayStation, with its single CPU design and aggressive third-party outreach, rapidly overtook the Saturn in the West. By 1997, Sega's share of the global console market had plummeted to just 12%, a staggering fall from its Genesis-era dominance. Inside Sega, the mood grew tense. The company cycled through executives and strategies as divisions in Japan and America clashed over what the next move should be. Key leaders like Tom Kalinske, who had driven Genesis to success, departed. The wounds from failed hardware lingered, eroding trust among retailers, developers, and consumers alike. Every new initiative seemed to carry the shadow of the last misstep, and the brand's once edgy image now felt battered and uncertain. The warning signs were impossible to ignore. Sega's audience was shrinking, its reputation was frayed, and the company was running out of second chances. Inside Sega, a quiet contest was underway. Two rival teams, each convinced they held the key to Sega's future, worked in parallel to design the company's next home console. In the United States, an 11-person skunkworks led by former IBM engineer Tatsuo Yamamoto built their vision around the 3DFX Voodoo graphics chip, a name with real muscle in the booming PC gaming world. This prototype, called Black Belt, promised raw power, and it was backed by Sega of America's leadership, who saw Western developer support as essential after years of missed opportunities. Meanwhile, in Japan, Hideki Sato, veteran architect of Sega's hardware lineage, assembled his own team. Their project Dural paired a new Hitachi SH4 processor with NEC, PowerVR2 graphics. Sato's group prioritized cost, integration, and close ties to Japanese partners. After the Saturn's notorious complexity, they wanted a system that would be easier to manufacture and friendlier to developers. The Dural design also offered a built-in modem, a bold step toward online play. For months, both teams raced to refine their prototypes. Black Belt's 3DFX technology looked impressive on paper, and Sega of America believed its PC-style architecture would attract major publishers. But in Tokyo, Sato's approach gained traction. The PowerVR2's tile-based rendering promised strong performance at a lower price, and the SH4 processor was tailored for three-dimensional games. Internal documents show Sega's top brass weighing not just graphics power, but also cost, manufacturability, and the reliability of Japanese supply chains. The contest ended in September 1997, when Sega of Japan chose Sato's design. The decision was as much about politics as technology. 3DFX had publicly announced its involvement before Sega was ready, angering executives and triggering a lawsuit that was quietly settled. Bernie Stolar, then president of Sega of America, later recalled that Japan wanted the Japanese version, and Japan won. He said he lost that argument. Dural, soon renamed Katana, would become the blueprint for Dreamcast. Sato's victory set Sega's final gamble in motion, a next-generation console built to unite the company's fractured vision and reclaim its place at the heart of gaming. The engineering team behind Dreamcast set out to erase the memory of the Saturn's tangled design. Their answer was a system that felt like a leap into the future. At its heart, the Dreamcast combined a 200 MHz Hitachi SH4 processor with NEC's PowerVR2 graphics chip. This pairing gave the console the muscle to handle advanced 3D graphics, smooth animation, and effects that rivaled the arcades. Developers who had struggled with the Saturn's dual CPU-S now found a single, streamlined architecture. The floating-point performance of the SH4, rare for a home console at the time, allowed for complex geometry and lifelike movement. The PowerVR2, with its tile-based rendering, made it possible to push detailed worlds without the cost or heat of rivals' hardware. Storage was another bold step. Instead of standard CDS, Sega introduced the GD-ROM, short for Gigabyte Disk. Co-developed with Yamaha, this format held up to 1.2 gigabytes, nearly double a typical CD. It was meant to give developers more freedom for sound, visuals, and game worlds, while cutting licensing fees tied to the new DVD standard. The controller carried its own innovation, 2 expansion slots, most famously for the visual memory unit, a memory card with a screen that could display stats or even run simple mini-games. But the most forward-thinking feature sat quietly on the side of every console, a built-in 56K modem. At a time when online play was still a novelty, Dreamcast was designed from the start to connect players to each other and to Sega's own network. The modem could be swapped for faster broadband down the line, showing that Sega was planning for a connected future. For the engineers, Dreamcast wasn't just another console. It was a platform built to invite creativity, to welcome developers back, and to give players something they had never seen before, all in a machine that was powerful, affordable, and ready for the world that was coming. September 9th, 1999. In the early hours, lines curled around electronics stores across the United States. For Sega, this was the moment everything rested on, a new beginning, a chance to reclaim lost ground. The Dreamcast launch blitz was unlike anything the industry had seen. Peter Moore, the newly minted president of Sega of America, pushed a $100 million marketing campaign that blanketed television, magazines, and even city billboards. The date itself, September 9th, became a rallying cry. Moore, never one for half measures, famously tattooed the numbers on his arm, a permanent reminder of Sega's all-in gamble. By midnight, anticipation had reached a fever pitch. When doors opened, 225,132 Dreamcast consoles flew off shelves in just 24 hours, racking up $98.4 million in revenue, a record for entertainment launches at the time. Retailers scrambled to keep up with demand, while Sega's phone lines buzzed with customers eager for updates. The Dreamcast launch library boasted 19 games, from Sonic Adventure's sprawling worlds to the digital stadiums of NFL 2K. Reviewers praised the system's graphics and online potential, calling it the future of gaming. The numbers kept climbing. Within 2 weeks, American sales topped 500,000 units. By early November, Sega announced 1 million Dreamcast consoles sold in North America alone. For a brief electric window, Sega held 31% of the US console market, a comeback that seemed unthinkable a year earlier. Moore's relentless drive and the team's energy gave Sega its brightest day in years. But beneath the surface, the financial strain was already mounting. Each console sold below cost, and the campaign's expense loomed. For now, though, Dreamcast's launch was pure triumph, a moment when Sega's vision, ambition, and risk paid off, if only for a fleeting high. Every Dreamcast that left the shelf chipped away at Sega's reserves. The retail price of $199 in the United States was a bold move to win back gamers, but the actual cost to manufacture each console hovered closer to $250. That meant Sega lost money on every box sold, long before factoring in marketing, distribution, or the cost of building up an online network. As the months passed and price cuts followed, the losses deepened. By the end, Dreamcast units were being cleared out for as little as $49.95, each sale compounding the financial wound. Behind the scenes, Isao Okawa, Sega's chairman and largest shareholder, became the company's financial lifeline. Okawa poured hundreds of millions of his own dollars into Sega, sometimes as loans, sometimes as outright gifts, just to keep operations afloat. His support allowed Sega to weather the cost of aggressive marketing campaigns, unsold inventory, and the steep bills from launching a global online service. But even Okawa's generosity had limits. The company's financial reports painted a grim picture: multi-year operating losses, mounting debt, and a hardware division burning through cash with no relief in sight. By the time DreamCast's run ended, analysts estimated Sega's hardware ambitions had drained several billion dollars in total. The scale of the losses made it impossible to keep fighting, no matter how much passion or pride remained inside Sega's walls. Sony's next move arrived like a tidal wave. In early 1999, the company unveiled PlayStation 2, promising more than just another leap in graphics. Sony's engineers talked up the Emotion Engine, a custom chip designed to handle movie-like visuals, and showcased demos that left the press buzzing about a new era of realism. But the real disruptor wasn't buried in technical specs. It was the DVD drive. At a time when standalone DVD players still cost hundreds of dollars, PlayStation 2 would let families watch movies and play games on a single device. For many households, that made the $299 price tag seem like a bargain. The announcement landed months before PlayStation 2 was even available, but the effect was immediate. Retailers, already cautious after Sega's previous stumbles, began to hedge their bets. Many shifted prime shelf space and advertising dollars towards Sony's upcoming console, anticipating massive demand. The promise of backward compatibility with the original PlayStation library only deepened the appeal. Millions of gamers, still loyal to their PlayStation 1 collections, now had a reason to wait. Why buy a DreamCast today if PlayStation 2 would play their old games and double as a DVD player tomorrow? By the time PlayStation 2 launched in Japan in March 2000, supply shortages fueled anticipation even further. In the United States, the long lines and sold-out pre-orders became national news. The DreamCast, once the hottest ticket in gaming, found itself increasingly sidelined, not by a better game or a lower price, but by the idea of a future-proof machine just over the horizon. The market was holding its breath, and Sega felt the pause with every passing month. Electronic Arts had long been the kingmaker of sports gaming, with annual hits like Madden and FIFA driving console sales across North America and Europe. On DreamCast, their absence was impossible to ignore. Negotiations between Sega and Electronic Arts broke down early. Electronic Arts wanted exclusive rights to sports titles and more favorable terms, but Sega, banking on its own 2K series, refused to concede. Larry Probst, the chief executive officer of Electronic Arts, walked away from the table. The result was a system without Madden or FIFA, at a time when those franchises defined the market. For many buyers, no Electronic Arts meant no sale. Other publishers took notice. As PlayStation 2's promise grew, third-party support for DreamCast began to dry up. Some studios shifted projects to Sony's platform, wary of Sega's shaky finances and the memory of past hardware failures. The DreamCast library, once flush with arcade ports and creative experiments, started to thin. Fewer new titles meant fewer reasons to buy the console, and the cycle fed on itself. Then came a blow from inside Sega's own technology. Dreamcast's LCD feature, designed to add multimedia capabilities to music CDs, opened a back door. Hackers discovered how to use it to boot pirated games from standard CD-R discs, bypassing Sega's proprietary CD-ROM. Suddenly, anyone with a CD burner could play copied games, devastating software sales. For a system already losing money on hardware, every lost game sale cut deeper. Publishers, already skittish, saw the revenue evaporate. The Dreamcast business model depended on strong software sales to offset hardware losses. Now, both pillars were crumbling. Inside Sega, the sense of crisis grew sharper. The pipeline of new games slowed to a trickle, and the boardroom braced for hard decisions. Inside Sega's boardroom, the mood was raw. Isao Okawa, the chairman and largest shareholder, sat at the head of the table. His personal fortune, already propping up the company, through years of mounting losses. Across from him, Peter Moore, president of Sega of America, pressed for more time, arguing that the Dreamcast still had life in the West, that a price cut or one last blockbuster might turn the tide. Okawa's patience was thin. He had already forgiven hundreds of millions in debt just to keep the lights on. The board, restless and divided, demanded a resolution. Some executives clung to the belief that Sega's hardware legacy could still be saved. Others saw only the bleeding numbers and shrinking reserves. The arguments grew sharper, with Moore's optimism clashing against Okawa's hard arithmetic. The company's future, jobs, reputation, even survival hung in the balance. As the debate stretched on, it became clear that the divide was not just about business strategy, but about pride, loyalty, and the limits of hope. The decision looming over the room was final, and everyone knew there would be no going back. On March 31st, 2001, Sega halted production of the Dreamcast. The announcement landed with the weight of finality, not just for a console, but for an entire era of hardware ambition. By that date, Dreamcast shipments totaled around 9.13 million units worldwide, a figure that fell far short of the company's hopes and nowhere near the scale of rivals like Sony. Warehouses still held nearly 1 million unsold consoles, and Sega responded with sweeping price reductions. The Dreamcast, once a $199 marvel at launch, was cleared out for as little as $49.95 in its final months. Retailers slashed prices to clear shelves, and the last new units trickled out to bargain hunters and collectors. Inside Sega, the decision was absolute. There would be no last-minute reversal, no miracle turnaround. The company's board, led by Isao Okawa, set the hardware division on a path toward closure. Employees who had poured years into the Dreamcast's design and support faced the reality that Sega would no longer build its own consoles. The focus shifted to software, and the remaining Dreamcast inventory became a symbol of ambition spent. For fans and employees alike, the end of hardware production was more than a business move. It was the closing of a chapter, with Sega's hardware legacy boxed up and sold off, one discounted console at a time. Gaming moves at breakneck speed, but the lessons of bold innovation and costly miscalculation still shape every new launch. Sega's exit from hardware marked a turning point. Today, not even giants are immune to disruption. As consoles become platforms and risks grow ever steeper, the Dreamcast's fate reminds us that vision alone isn't enough. Sometimes the future arrives before the world is ready. What do you think? Was it ahead of its time?